So you had mentioned that recent Karen video from Victoria's Secret.
Yes.
Yep, and which of course I had seen, and of course I always see all the Karen videos, and it's interesting because from the perspective of a white woman, I know that's painful, though sometimes I think from the perspective of a white woman, it's like watching a blooper reel, and the thing that you said that stood out was like this was triggering for you. And of course I can when you say that, I'm like, of course that is. That's like reliving probably like the traumatic microaggressions that you have told me a little bit about.
Right.
So what I would like to hear is not really do much talking, but to kind of just hear a little bit your perspective, what that made you think, and maybe some of your experiences.
For sure. So yeah, no, when I saw that video, and just like you said, we see them, and sometimes they're funny, and I just, you laugh, right, and you keep it moving. But the part that was really triggering in that particular video, and I hope everyone knows what we're talking about, it's the most recent one. So today's the 21st, was a lady in Victoria's Secret who got upset and fell on the ground. So I don't know when you might post this, but that's what we're talking about. But the part I was watching, and I'm just like, oh, here she goes. But there's a part where there's a lady in line who tells the Black woman, just leave her alone. And so that was the part where and it literally, that was the part that triggered me, because I can think of all the times that I know that I'm not the aggressor. And it's like, well, they're telling you to leave the other person alone. And that was, it bothered me a lot more than any of the other videos. And that's what I reached out to you, and I share with you a current issue in my workplace. But that's just one issue that I share with you. And there's so many more. And that's what was like angering, right? Because I don't think, one, and as you said earlier, as a woman, just generally any woman, you want to have that protection, right? Like if something's going on, you want people to kind of rally and help you. And so I feel like as a Black woman, that's not happening, right? And it doesn't happen. And even in the most professional way, people will say, oh, chalk it up, you're fine, you're strong, you're okay. But they'll coddle another woman who has the same issue. And so that's what was triggering in that video, and I'm not too sure, because when I was watching it, at the same time, as a woman, I still like, I hope that other lady doesn't have a real deal mental issue, right? Because she may have, and I don't want to put down a woman. I really don't. I mean, it could be, because anyone who acts like that has to have something going on. But at the same time, and like you said, that double minority part, my heart goes out to the Black woman, because I know everyone's looking at her like she's in the wrong. And she literally was just standing there with the phone protecting herself. So as she's protecting herself, she still has to convince everyone that she needs help. And that gets tiring. It does.
What industry do you work in?
So right now I work for government, right? So I work for the city of Fort Lauderdale. I've always worked for government. And that's what I do. So in any government agency, you're going to have a number of people. You have engineers, you have all kind of professionals, right? And that's what I like about it. So it's not just, it'd be easy if I was in the healthcare field to say, sometimes doctors act like this, or sometimes, these type of practitioners act like this, but in government, you got everybody, but even if I worked retail all throughout college, right? There's that time where when someone else is having, and it just happens to be a white woman having a bad day, or might just be a rude person generally, women who minorities, and because I've worked down in South Florida, I'll tell you, it also goes for my Latina sisters too. So I don't want to just say, but it's just like, oh, you're strong, let her be, you mind your business over here, or you'll be okay, or well, they might joke about it with you, but then don't kind of circle back to say, hey, how did her actions make you feel? Or are you okay? Or was that funny? You know what I mean? And you see it the other way around. So it gets old, and it's tough.
Yeah, coincidentally, I am in healthcare, and I'm kind of on the commercial side. So everyone that I deal with is either a doctor, a lawyer, or a scientist, pretty much. So super, the kind of fields where you have to do extra education, to get in these kind of positions. And I have the conversations, man. My last company, I won't mention it, but yeah, there was one Black woman I was one of 4 Black people, and she was the only Black woman. And it's a large, major company. And it goes, whenever I'm talking about these specific issues in healthcare, you talk about it from the patient side. So people know that there's a lot of discrimination with the patients as well. And I do hear a lot of Black women talk about how afraid they are because people, for whatever, well, we know what the reason is, they don't come to the aid. They don't, I think you use the word coddle, or just show care for Black women in the same way that white women are cared for. And in that, it was last year that I posted a study that I had found. There's, I forget how many it was, but it'd be an alarming number of medical doctors, people that have gone to medical school.
I remember that study.
Actually believe
the pain factor, is that what?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So yeah, and the thing about the post, I said, it spills into every aspect of our lives. It's not only in healthcare, it's not only in government. But how long do you think you've noticed that? Was it as soon as you went in? Because I remember when I first went into corporate America, I was so excited that it took me a while to. I was that past company that I used to work for that I told you about. I was so excited to be there and be business travel and business class trips and this kind of thing, that it took me a while to be like, oh, okay, wait, I've settled in. This is starting to feel a way. Have you always felt that way, or is it something that is it a specific person or a specific thing?
No. So in the workplace, I can't, right? But I think, like you said, it's just that conditioning, right? So just once again, as a woman, you're told don't be whiny in the workplace, right? You want people to take you seriously, don't be whiny, don't complain. That's just all women, right? But then as a Black woman, I know that anything I say, even in the softest tone with flowers in my hand, if it's not agreeable, then I'm angry. And so I just think, I can't say in the workplace, I think that's just been school. That's every interaction that you have, you're going to be disagreeable. And even if it could be very well like something very valid, and even though if people might say, oh yeah, LaKesha, you're right, I see it your way, but you were a little crass in how you said, and it's just like,
do you feel like that means you can't be angry when it's called for? Like,
very true. Yeah, I do feel that way. So like, for instance, and what Allison's talking about is like, there was an email that was sent to me that was rude across the board. No one would disagree with me. No one has disagreed with me. That's just it. Even my manager said, wow, this is not right. So when I responded, my manager still said, hey, your response wasn't unprofessional, but just leave her alone. That's how she is. And that was literally, and the fortunate thing about where I work, it's a very diverse crowd. So my manager is he's a gay Hispanic male, right? So this is like, I'm thinking to myself, you should know where I'm coming from. Like you should know. And he's just like, it was just kind of like, LaKesha, you're LaKesha. Don't worry about her. You didn't do anything wrong. Just ignore it.
Is it almost like a thing like you're perceived to be tougher, or?
Right. That's exactly it. I think that's it. Not just me. I think that Black women, like, you go back to that study, and I know that was a pain threshold, but I think that matriarch, strong Black woman trope is attached to every Black woman. So like, you can take, not so much that we think you're a bad person. I don't, and I never felt to think I've been made to feel that way. I don't think that, but it's like, you can take this, she can't, right? And that's kind of how it goes. So you kind of just get kicked, and you're just expected to keep it moving, right? Because if you do chirp up, now you are the angry Black woman, right? And just an angry woman. And once again, it's a double minority, right? Because you don't want to be that lady who's like, wow, somebody wrote me this mean email. Or because even if you're validated, or you're valid in your thoughts, you're still going to be like, you're going to be chastised, about it. And I don't like that. So, and that's what I've noticed too. And I've also noticed from other women. So I can't just say that's men in the workplace, right? I've had minority managers, Black women managers, who just be like, don't worry about her, or how they are, and just keep it moving. But when unfortunately, my last name's not Rockefeller, I'm going to be working for some years. That gets old. And day in and day out. And so I do find myself sometimes just ignoring the bad behavior towards me, because it's not worth the fight to speak up. It's not, and it's going to cause me more stress and more angst. And I'll just, and that, once again, that's like not good for my mental health, right? Because you just come home, and luckily I have friends like you, and you vent to your friends, but this is my career, right? And so after a while, you just can't keep taking those kicks, you know.
But that's what I think is important about like these conversations in this organization. And Dee, you brought this up earlier, the topic of intersectionality. And I think that fits really well here. And for people who are listening in, I'm going to try to define this somewhat, and do you fill in the spaces? But I mean, basically, we are not defined just by being a woman only, just like you're not defined as being only a woman. You're not defined as only being a Black person. You're defined by many different things, and you're affected by many different things, and you will undergo different pressures depending on, you know, those different characteristics. But what we find in like the workplace is sometimes women think we're all in this together, right? Like women, but you may be going through other things that a specifically Black woman may go through that white women can't even wrap their minds around because they aren't going through it, and so therefore don't seem to think it's a problem.
Right. And you can face discrimination and oppression from other minority groups. So I'm a Black male, but I'm a Black straight male. So a Black gay male has had to deal with things that I haven't had to deal with. And that's kind of where those cross sections come into play. And I think, you know, Black women, especially Black lesbians, Black lesbians with disabilities, there's so many things that can take you further down that totem pole. And it always comes back to power, right? Where you feel like you have less and less and less power.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And so, like, once again, I moved down to South Florida because, you know, I'm from Indiana, which I love where I'm from, but I moved down here for the diversity. So on my team, there's only there's 30 of us, and there's only 4 Americans. And I know that probably sounds crazy.
Wow.
But 4 Americans. Now, some people moved here when they were 8, but like genuine Americans, like 4 of us. But I also find, and this goes into a deeper conversation, and I know 40 minutes is not long enough for this, but if, you know, some of my coworkers, majority of them Puerto Ricans and Cubans, right? So they're not quite white, but they're not quite Black, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on where they come in. There's a few Dominicans I work with too, but their attitudes are like cute and sassy, and they can say the same exact thing that I say. And it's happened, right? And then it's like, oh, LaKesha, are you okay? You having a bad day? And I'm like, no, I was agreeing with her. Like, we were all laughing together. And so, and really sometimes, and I'm like hyper conscious. Like, well, did I have a tone? You know, because I start thinking like, well, was I rude? And it plays with your mind, because I'm like, I know for a fact I said it the same exact way. And that makes it, early when I was younger and started working, to go back to your question, it was an insecurity, because I started to wonder, maybe I need to up talk more, or maybe I need to change my posture. Because why am I getting this feedback, right? You know, so I'm like, maybe I am rude, you know? And so you kind of start thinking about that. And over professional development, I'm like, no, this is what it is. But, you know, for young students and young people in the workforce, I don't think they realize that that's kind of being thrown on them every day, and they start to internalize that. Because I know I did. Because I started thinking, well, maybe I should sit with these people at lunch so they don't think I'm always mad, you know? And I'm a grown woman at this point. Like, I'm grown. There shouldn't be that ideal in my head. But I don't want to be perceived as mad, you know? So you try to do everything you can to be nice.
So you would say you kind of temper yourself, like who you are in the workplace a bit?
Right. Yeah. And not just, of course, we all have to do that to some extent, right?
Yeah,
I can't love everybody. Like, no, I get that. But I also realize that more so than everyone else. And I know that's true, because they'll say the same thing.
Are you optimistic about the future? Because as I took some diversity and inclusion type courses over the past summer of 2020. And I started to learn a lot more. I've always, you know, immersed myself in these kind of,
I don't know.
But I feel like more companies in the private sector, the government sector, all across the board, schools are starting to realize how important the inclusion and equity parts are. Because diversity was the first thing. You know, you can have diversity is just a fact. It can be there if you let it. But if you don't work actively on inclusion, then what you're doing is throwing people into a hostile environment. And that's what you're feeling. I think. I don't make it a habit of telling people how they feel. But it can feel very hostile. And I just say that from experience. But when you have practices in place in your office where it just naturally happens that you start to see different kinds of people at different levels of the organization, and you can tell by, you know, the different team building activities or what they serve in the lunchroom and these different kind of things about, okay, they're really trying to make sure that everybody that works here feels included. And I feel like, I hope it's not a fad, you know, just coming off of, you know, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, but I feel like we're kind of moving in the right direction in that way. What do you think?
No, I am hopeful, right? Because I think everyone on this line right now is millennials, and I think that we're moving that way. And I look at Gen Z, like, because we're starting to hire Gen Z in the city, I can tell you that. And they are more open to me, because I'm like, I need to probably learn that, or oh, what are these pronouns, or what are, you know? So I'm hopeful for the future, and I don't think that it is a fad, right? And I think that and I hope that it's not. I guess I should say I hope that it's not. And I work with a lot of older people, because once again, government people stay until they retire. And I have seen people who feel comfortable talking to me, which really warms my heart. I will say that, because I do think I have a personality which people know that they ask me a question respectfully, that I will not be offended. And I'm like, oh no, I'll tell you what this means. And so we just had the Juneteenth celebration, right? I always celebrate that. My family, it's nothing new to me. I grew up celebrating that. But down here, and I will tell you, there's also a Jewish population. So I want you to picture this. I work with a lady. She's 65. She's a New Yorker, Jewish, and she is stuck in her ways. And that's just her. She's not changing anything. So she pulled me to the side, and I'm thinking like, and it's so funny, because I was like, what did I say now? You know, what did I do now? But she was like, I want to ask you about Juneteenth. Can you explain that to me? I don't know what's going on. And genuinely, she was genuine. And I was like, oh, and I explained to her the history, and I can see her saying, oh, okay. So I think she might have thought it was like some Black celebration that she was excluded from, right? But didn't quite want to ask everyone. And I feel honored to be the trusted person she knew would give her a legit answer, right? And so I gave you her background just so I can say I do feel hopeful that people they're opening their minds a little more to saying, let me just ask, right?
Yeah.
Versus just thinking in her mind, well, I'm going to ignore this and move on with my day. And so that really made my week, I'll be honest with you. And she did. She's like, well, then I'm going to celebrate. And then she just like walked away and minds her own business. And in my mind, I'm like, what a victory, you know? So I will say I'm hopeful.
Do you feel like when you get asked questions like that from white people, and I know Dee gets asked them all the time, especially because you're putting yourself out there. I mean, do you ever feel like, look, I just don't feel like explaining it to you right now, or like, I shouldn't have to explain it to you, but I'm sure then you have this well-meaning old lady, but.
Yeah, no, I do, right? Oh my gosh. But listen, once again, we're all from Indiana, right? So that's been happening my whole life. I do, but I also know that I am a cisgender female, and I know that I have trusted friends who I ask questions about who are in the LGBT plus community, right? I don't make it a habit to every time I see my friend who identifies maybe as, you know, gay, like, hey, let me ask you this. No, but I know that there's trusted people in those communities that I can say, please help me understand, because I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to step on anyone's foot. Can you help me? And so, yeah, it does get tiring. I can't lie. But I also know when people's coming to me with a genuine question that I'm making a change, right? And so, yeah, it's both, right? And it's just one of those things.
And there are some loaded questions people can ask that are like more rude in a way, or I don't know. And that's different, I think. Those microaggressions.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And you're right. And I can't think of any examples. And it has happened to me. I can't think of any off the top of my head, you know, and sometimes I'll circle back, because sometimes people ask you a silly question and I'll say, what did I learn? Like, that's interesting. What makes you say that? Right. So then they have to identify their own microaggression.
Yeah, you're like disarming them basically.
Right. And it was something I learned that in a class, I forget. But you know, maybe they'll say like, how do you feel, does Black Lives Matter bother you? And I'm like, that's interesting. Why would it? And then they have to say out loud why they think. And that's how I kind of have learned to kind of start that conversation, you know. But I know it can be tiring, but for me, because it is a passion of mine, I don't allow it to be.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for people to ask the question in a way. I can ask you in your experience, because you have an experience. I've never ever in my life been in a room where there was only white people. I've never in my life been in a room where it's been only Black women, because my presence there breaks that. So I can say, you know, in your experience, you know, explain it to me. But I have to, if I care about this interaction going well, I have to make sure that you understand that I know you can't speak for all women, or LaKesha, you can't speak for all Black women.
Right.
But I do understand that you have an experience. You can speak from a place that I don't know. And I think that will kind of break some of that down, because I can ask you, Allison, you know, as a white woman, you know, I don't expect you to speak for all white women, but I've been in situations where I've been white women's supervisor, you know, but at the same time, I feel the power dynamic is weird, because you can't pull her to the office and say the same thing I would say to a white man, because as soon as she starts tearing up and crying, I gotta open the door like, hey, look, somebody else come in here. I'm not doing this. You know, like again, it's not all white women, but there is a history that terrifies me, you know, that I need to look, no tears. We gotta bring something else into this, you know.
That goes back to that Karen in the Victoria's Secret. Who knows why she was really, it doesn't even matter if she was crying because, or if she even knew what she was doing. She knew she felt comfortable enough that that would get her attention and that people would sympathize with her. She was assessing the situation, whether she had mental illness or not.
Whether it was calculated or not, there was something that was in her head that she knew she was going to get a reaction that was going to be favorable to her over the rest.
You know, I didn't watch the whole video. I would tell you, I stopped watching after the lady told her to just leave her alone. I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore. But I did see, like, I think BuzzFeed did an article where I think security did show up and still asked the Black woman to leave. I could be wrong, so I didn't finish the video. But if that's what happened, I believe it. I wouldn't even blink twice to think that they asked her to leave, you know. And that's how it feels in the workplace, right? Like you go about your day, we're gonna, you know, you'll be fine. And then
tough it out.
Yeah, and that's very tough, you know. That's tough.
So I also think maybe people are looking at it as it's like a one-off situation. This little thing, why are you worrying about this little thing? But they're not seeing the bigger picture of when it happens over and over and over, to where you can almost just predict that it will.
Right. And I know, and I think we all maybe could agree that if the roles were reversed, that would have been a different situation.
Exactly.
And that's the other part. Because if I felt like, oh, well, if it was the other way around, it would have been the same, then I would go on by my day and we wouldn't even be on this line right now, right? But we know that's not true. And that's the other part that's like disheartening, like that's not the truth, right? So people don't just see two women who are having a disagreement. They see a Black woman who needs to be strong and a white woman who really needs a lot of help. Let's help her. And she's the only one acting foolish, you know? So like,
I know.
You know, I don't know. I didn't finish it. And I did share that with you. And this goes back to like that trusted friend, right? Because I wouldn't just send that to all my white female friends, right? But I know that you and I can have that conversation. And so I enjoy, you know, your friendship, but I want people to have that with me too. So if there's like, LaKesha, may I ask you this? Absolutely, right? Or how do you feel about this? Like, I know this is kind of unrelated, but the female sprinter who didn't get the Sha'Carri, I think her name.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot of talk about that in the office, and there is this anxiety, like, what person's gonna ask me some stupid question today, right? That kind of hangs over your head, and it didn't happen. But that does go back to your question. There is sometimes anxiety with news that breaks, knowing that you might have to, people are gonna ask you a question, and it's triggering for us too. So like while we're trying to heal, you want, some people want us to help them, and that gets tiring.
You gotta be willing to do your own work. I think it's everybody wants to be helpful, and that's in sales they teach you that. If you ask open questions, if people know the answer, they'll want to help you as long as it's clear that you're after help. And like I said, the words matter and intention matters, and the way you put those words together, they can come off a lot differently.
It's true. Well, I was also thinking when you say something with the best of intention, but it still hurts someone's feelings, you have to be able to let the impact of that on the other person be real and acknowledge that, not just immediately deny that person the impact that has on that person. And I think as white people, that's something that we are not in the habit of doing. I mean, most people are not in the habit of, oh, I hurt your feelings, and then we get defensive, but we have to take it as a learning opportunity and do better.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. That goes for everyone. One thing that when you were talking, one thing I just burns my ears is when I hear someone say, I don't see color. Right. And that's a great example of, I know they're not trying to be malicious. I know they're actually trying to do the complete opposite. And it's so angering.
Yeah. You're like, well, please open your eyes because I am a different color than you.
Yes. So but you're right. That's one of those things, but that's if those people who want to say, listen, what change can I make? Like all of us on this phone, hey, when you say that, here's what I hear. And then I always validate them. I know that's not what you meant, because you don't want anyone to be like, well, I don't want to talk to Black people in the workplace now. No, I don't. I definitely don't want that.
But I spoke to so many Black people in different pockets of the community, teachers and people at the church, and people in the office. And a lot of them are fed up. I don't want to teach white people how not to be racist. I don't want to do it. That's not what I want to spend my time doing. And I get it. I was trying to figure out, why is it so difficult to get, more Black people realize Black people didn't make America racist. So
no.
why is it my job to help you? And then when I do tell you how I feel, you get in your feelings about it. So is it our job to deliver the message in a palatable way for them, or is it up to them to get over themselves long enough to come over to the light, or is that really where we're all human beings and everybody has to kind of give and take a little bit, kind of compromise for the sake of everybody.
I think this goes back though, because we have the same organization, little group of people who meet. I happen to be in it with the city, and we meet and we make sure that we have initiatives that we post all over. And this goes for everything. So because we're down here, Haitian Appreciation Week is a real holiday. We do everything we can to let everyone feel like, they're part of the team, because they should feel inclusive. And I think just getting that conversation going. So regardless if I'm the one they come to or not, they can still get that conversation going, which I think is just any employer's duty, period, regardless.
Yeah.
And we're wrapping up here, but through all you've been through, we spoke about Gen Z. Let's say there's a Black girl, young Black lady. She's fresh out of college. Maybe she's been in her job for 6 months to a year, and she is going through that. She's feeling bullied. She feels like she can't express herself, and you were the only person she had. What advice would you give to her?
Okay.
I feel like you might have bugged my phone. So I actually do have a summer intern right now who is a young Black woman. And gosh, the advice I will give to her is just to continue to be herself, right? And because professional development is going to be the same for everyone. If there's errors she's making, you'll grow, right? But if you're the kind of person who wants to chirp up and give your opinion, do it. Because I don't want any woman or any person, anybody, to damper their personality, their genuine professional personality to appease everyone else. Because first of all, you're not going to be happy, right? And you will not be happy. And there's going to be a leader somewhere in the organization who sees that in you. And it might be years. It may not be this organization. You might move on, but someone will see what you bring. But if you jeopardize the integrity of your character, then you'll never make it ahead. And I would tell that to anyone. But of course, especially brown women. But because I know how that feels to feel like I'm hampered, right? And I wouldn't want that for anyone.